It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Eric and I were celebrating our 2-year anniversary, a milestone I'd been eagerly anticipating. The restaurant was dimly lit, the aroma of Italian spices hung heavy in the air, and Eric was across the table, his eyes sparkling in a way that always made my heart skip a beat. And then, he suggested I get an abortion. I should have seen it coming, I really should have. But I was blinded by love, by the hope of a future with him. What happened next shattered my world. But it also made me stronger than I ever thought possible. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah, and this is my story. Have you ever had your world turned upside down in an instant? I'd love to hear about it. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments below. It always helps to know I'm not alone.
The news had been unexpected, a tiny plus sign on a pregnancy test that had both thrilled and terrified me. I had waited until our anniversary dinner to tell Eric, picturing his face lighting up with joy, imagining us planning our future together. But the joy never came. Instead, his face paled, and he stammered about being too young, about our careers, about what his mother would say. Barb, Eric's mother, was a force of nature, a woman who ruled her son's life with an iron fist disguised in perfectly manicured fingers. "Sarah," Eric began, his voice tight, "we're just not ready for this. And Mom would be devastated." My heart sank. "But Eric," I whispered, "I want this baby." His eyes darted around the restaurant, as if someone might overhear our conversation. "We can't. We just can't. There are options, Sarah. We can take care of it."
The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "Take care of it?" I repeated, my voice barely audible. "You mean an abortion?" He nodded, his gaze fixed on the tablecloth. "It's the most responsible thing to do." The next few minutes were a blur. I remember standing up, my chair scraping against the floor, the clatter echoing in the suddenly silent restaurant. I remember the burning sensation in my eyes as tears threatened to spill over. I remember grabbing my purse and walking out, leaving Eric sitting there, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The thought of facing Eric, of having to listen to his justifications, was unbearable. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring through my tears. Finally, I pulled over at a park, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets. I sat there for hours, the weight of my situation crushing me.
In the morning, I made a decision. I wouldn't stay. I wouldn't be pressured into something I didn't want. I drove back to Eric's apartment, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. I packed a bag, throwing in clothes, toiletries, anything I could grab quickly. I left my phone and wallet on the kitchen counter, a small act of defiance. As I walked out the door, I knew I was leaving more than just a place. I was leaving a life I had imagined for myself. I drove straight to my best friend Sandy's apartment. Sandy had always been my rock, the one person I could always count on. When I told her everything, her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Sarah," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm so sorry. You don't have to go through this alone." Sandy let me stay with her, offering me a safe haven from the storm raging in my life. But I knew I couldn't impose on her generosity forever. I needed to find a job, a place to live, a way to support myself and my baby. The job hunt was brutal. I had worked as a receptionist before, but now, visibly pregnant, I was met with closed doors and polite rejections. Finally, out of desperation, I took a job as a dishwasher at a local diner. The work was hard, the hours long, and the pay barely covered my expenses, but it was something. The first few weeks were the hardest. I was constantly exhausted, nauseous, and overwhelmed. I missed Eric, despite everything. I missed our life together, the comfort and security I had taken for granted. He started calling, leaving voicemails filled with apologies and pleas for me to come back. He said he had made a mistake, that he loved me, that he wanted to be a father, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. His words felt hollow, tainted by his initial rejection.
One evening, after a particularly grueling shift at the diner, I broke down. I was sitting on Sandy's couch, my feet swollen and aching, when the tears started to flow. I cried for my lost love, for my lost dreams, for the future I now faced alone. Sandy held me, letting me sob until I had nothing left. "You're strong, Sarah," she said softly. "You can do this. You don't need him. You don't need anyone but yourself and that baby." Her words gave me a flicker of hope, a tiny spark of determination. I knew she was right. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for my baby. As my pregnancy progressed, my situation became increasingly precarious. The diner job wasn't enough to cover my expenses, and I was constantly worried about being able to afford rent, food, and medical care. Sandy did everything she could to help, but she had her own bills to pay.
One day, I stumbled upon a flyer for a local women's shelter. I hesitated, unsure if I qualified for their services. But I was desperate. I called the number and spoke to a kind woman who listened patiently to my story. She assured me that I wasn't alone and that they could help. The shelter was a lifeline. They provided me with prenatal care, counseling, and access to resources I never knew existed. I met other women in similar situations, women who had faced unimaginable hardships and were fighting for a better life for themselves and their children. We shared our stories, our fears, and our hopes. We supported each other, reminding each other that we were not alone. Through the shelter, I was able to secure a spot in a transitional housing apartment. It was a small, one-bedroom unit, but it was mine. It was a place where I could start to build a new life for myself and my baby.
Around this time, my mother, who I hadn't spoken to much since moving in with Eric, reached out. She had heard about my situation from a mutual friend, and despite our past differences, offered her support. It wasn't much, a few $100s here and there, but it made a difference. It helped ease the financial burden, allowing me to focus on preparing for the arrival of my child. The day Lily was born was the most incredible day of my life. Holding her in my arms, feeling her tiny fingers grip mine, I knew that everything I had gone through was worth it. She was perfect, a miracle, a symbol of hope and resilience. A few weeks after Lily's birth, Eric showed up at my apartment. He looked different, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. He held a bouquet of flowers, lilies, of course. "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling, "I'm so sorry. I was wrong, so wrong. I want to be a part of Lily's life. I want to be a father." I looked at him, at the genuine remorse in his eyes, and a part of me wanted to forgive him, to believe that he had truly changed. But another part of me, the part that had learned to be strong and independent, hesitated. "Eric," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I appreciate your apology, and I want Lily to know her father. But things will never be the same between us. I need to protect my daughter, and that means making sure she's in a stable and loving environment." We agreed to a visitation schedule, allowing Eric to see Lily a few times a week. He was attentive and loving with her, and I could see that he genuinely cared. But I remained cautious, guarding my heart and my daughter's well-being. My parents, seeing my struggles, offered me a rental property they owned.
It was a small house in a quiet neighborhood, perfect for raising a child. The rent was affordable, and it gave me a sense of security and stability. Life wasn't easy. I still worked at the diner, balancing work with motherhood. But I was no longer alone. I had Lily, my friends, my family, and a newfound sense of purpose. I learned to rely on myself, to trust my instincts, and to never give up on my dreams. As Lily grew, so did my confidence. I enrolled in online classes, determined to finish my degree. I started saving money, dreaming of a better future for my daughter. I realized that I didn't need Eric or anyone else to define my worth. I was a mother, a survivor, and a force to be reckoned with. One day, I was talking to Sandy about the past, about the pain and heartache I had endured. "You know," she said, "you've come so far. You've built a beautiful life for yourself and Lily."
You should be proud. I smiled, looking at my daughter who was playing happily at my feet. I am, I said. I am incredibly proud. I realized that the events of the past had shaped me, had made me the woman I am today. I had learned to forgive, not just Eric, but myself. I had learned to embrace the present and to look forward to the future with hope and optimism. And so, I chose to move forward, leaving the past behind. I focused on raising Lily, on building a fulfilling career, and on creating a life filled with love, laughter, and happiness. I learned that true strength comes not from avoiding adversity, but from facing it head on and emerging stronger on the other side. It's amazing what you can do when you have no other option. I proved it. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was my life, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Because in the end, I discovered that the greatest love of all is the love of a mother for her child, a love that can conquer any obstacle and overcome any challenge. And that's when I realized that sometimes the most unexpected detours lead to the most beautiful destinations. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming and inspiring tales.